Hello, everyone, and welcome to Survive This Script, a podcast where we combine our love for horror movies and RPGs and try and figure out whether or not we can survive the horror movie.
Ooh,
Woo. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Nick, and with me today, as always, my lovely co-host, Kylie.
yes, I am here and I am ready to have some fun. So, before we reveal the name of the film that we're doing, which you probably have already seen if you clicked on the title, tell me about what's been going on in your life, Nick.
All right, so again to our first segment, highs and lows. Let's see, Kylie. For me, probably a low. It's been a crazy week for me. My wife has been sick. I was sick at the start of the week. We just got back from Young Life Summer Camp, which is a summer camp where we just spend a week with high school kids and tell them about Jesus. And
You
honestly,
didn't
it's,
sleep at all, I'm sure.
no, we did not. Which is and on the first day, I kid you not, we're having this big Pizookie dessert. That's one of the big things that they do there. They serve out Pizookies. And one thing I do with the kids just to make it more fun is rather than like slice it up nice and nice with a little pie cutter, I look at all the kids like, all right, who wants to just grab a spoon and dig in? Let's just like all devour it and see how fast we can eat it. And I'm like, yeah, and we eat. And then I'm like asking the kids, like, how are you doing? How are you doing? This girl said at my table, I'm like, how are you doing? And she goes, well, I'm sick. And I'm like, yeah, I've been having a headache all day. I've been sniffling, and I'm like,
You tell me now? You could have
you
not
have
partaken.
signed my death sentence. Thank you. I didn't get sick all week, but then as soon as Kaya and I got home, sure enough, we were both down for like 48 hours. Actually, I was down for 48 hours. She was down all week. So
Gee.
yeah, I've been into a super husband mode of just like taking care of her and at the same time doing my job and whatnot. So that was a low, but the week at camp was a high. And then just other things piled on, like what was it? Working on doing oil changes. I've been teaching myself how to do oil changes for our cars. And sure enough, I kid you not, at the start of the week, oil starts leaking out of my wife's car.
Oh no. At least you learned how, right?
I learned how. I also learned it wasn't my fault. I took it to a That's the important thing is that it wasn't my fault. I took it to a professional and they were telling me like, "Oh yeah, this happens sometimes even if you do it right. You just got to test it afterwards." But yeah, there's oil now all over our driveway and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, now I got to find a
Oh
way to clean that up."
no.
I'm gonna have to
That's so
borrow a pressure
frustrating.
washer from a neighbor, so. But it's all good. I'm living life and life has been busy, but it's been fun. And I'd rather be doing all this stuff than sitting around binge watching too many things. Ironic because we
Preach.
run a horror movie review podcast, but too much of a good thing can be a bad thing.
Yeah, too much clutter without creating is not always the best. But I'm glad Young Life went well too, because I briefly, for a stint in the winter, I worked in the serving team where we
Hmm.
would serve like meals on trays and all that. I was terrible at it. The serving trays they had us have were like enormous, like this big
Oh
of
yeah,
trays.
they're still
And
that big.
yeah, why? They don't need to be. I hit somebody in the head with one of those trays and I knocked food on the ground more than once, and I was only there 2.5 days. And I made an enormous mess multiple times. It was not my gift. It was not my spiritual calling, but it was still really fun because it was up in Williams, right? The
Yeah.
highs and lows on my end. My high is also my low. My high was like the last month we've been traveling and doing stuff every week and weekend, where I went to Arizona twice last month for different events and visited you guys in San Diego when you came out, and
Mm.
traveling a lot more this summer that's upcoming. So on the plus side, it's been a lot of travel, but on the downside, I'm somebody who craves routine. So I really miss my general routine and structure of having taking my vitamins in the morning and always walking the dogs at a certain time. Stuff like that, like the little things structurally I miss doing.
Mm.
So that's my hot take. Any other super type A folks, let me know. who craves structure and miss the constant routine, let me know, because it's real. I'm surprised how much I've missed basic routine.
Mm. Yeah, no, you know me, I'm definitely in a similar vein. I've just kind of gotten to the point where I've just kind of given up, where I'm like, you know what, things go sideways, whatever, I guess it just happens. That's part of the routine now, I guess.
That's fair. That's fair. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not that chill yet, but I'd like to reach that level. I'm aspiring to be more like you in that way, where I can be like, things are out the window. That's fine. Right now, when that happens, I'm like, the world is gonna end and I will die in the fiery center of it.
Well, it takes a special kind of crazy to get where I'm at, so
You're, if I can make a Star Wars reference as someone who's not really a big Star Wars fan, you're the Yoda and I am a
I almost got it.
Jedi.
Yes.
Okay. It's not that I'm not a Star Wars fan. I know the term Jedi. I just wasn't sure if they're the ones that are learning or if they're like the pros.
Oh,
So,
well, no, the Jedi's are the pros. You at least got in the right
Paladin?
camp.
That's a
That's
D&D class.
close. Padawan.
Padawan, that's basically the same thing.
Yeah. And if you want to better yet, you say I'm the Yoda to your Luke Skywalker, because Yoda
Ah,
directly teaches
yes.
Luke
Nick is the
Skywalker.
Yoda to my Luke Skywalker. There we go.
I'm
Boom.
just
Bada bing.
sitting, I'm just on your back telling you to do backflips.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, what have you been watching recently? What
Oh
has been
boy.
up there for you?
Kylie, I got some good ones for you this time. Ready? And they're not anime related.
Oh, thank God. Okay. I only can pretend I like anime for so many episodes in a row, and I know that I'm gonna get a lot of hate for
Ugh.
that. But the Grimm's fairy tale one seemed genuinely interesting. So I
Mhm.
do need to watch that still. It's on my watch list.
Okay. So what I've watched this time around, my wife and I, we started a new TV show. It's on Paramount Plus. It's not that new. It's new to us though.
Okay.
It's called Why Women Kill.
I love Why Women Kill. I've actually seen that show. It's so good.
It is very good. And just to give a brief summary of that, it's there's two seasons of it. I don't know if they're going to plan to make any more, but the first season is interesting in that it follows three different married couples through three different decades, the 60s, the 80s, and then modern
Mhm.
2019, but was when the show came out. And their whole situation of, well, as the title would suggest, why the women in the story end up killing somebody. And it takes an interesting point and it has a very much a thriller aspect to it, but also there's just a lot of drama going on. And as I've figured out throughout the years, I'm a sucker for seeing some drama, at least, fake drama, not real drama. So there's that. And then as for a movie, I was actually just watching this right before we started recording today.
Mhm.
The movie Nefarious. Finally watched it.
I've heard about this movie.
Yes, I told you about this movie.
Yeah. How was it?
Oh my God, it was so good. So good. So basically, a psychiatric evaluator is coming to interview a person who's on death row, and he basically has to determine whether or not this guy is insane.
Hmm.
And if he determines he's insane, then he gets to go free under the claim that he was, just insane, can't judge him for that. Or if he's not insane, then he does have to, be executed. And as he's interviewing the inmate tells him, "Oh, I'm actually a demon possessing this guy,
Oh,
and you and I are gonna sit through have this talk, and before the end of it, you are gonna commit three murders."
oh my gosh.
And I'll leave it at that. It's very
Okay.
intriguing. It's very small scale,
Hmm.
but the conversation, the dialogue of the film is just so interesting. And it just like it really gets you at the core. I don't know anyone who wouldn't sit through this movie and be like, "Oh my gosh," like it will turn you introspective for a hot second in
All
a good
right.
way.
Heck yeah. I love that. All right. I'm gonna have to add that to my list because we've talked about it, but I haven't seen it yet. But it sounds like it'd be a good slow burn in some
Hmm.
ways where it's not like right in your face right away. I've been watching Fresh Off the Boat. on Hulu.
Mhm.
It's we're on season 3 or 4 now. It's a great sitcom, honestly. It's got just interesting dynamic characters who, I mean, as someone who's transplanted multiple times into different communities, it's very relatable, and the family dynamic is relatable, and it's watching these kids grow up in different circumstances that it's fun, and they're growing up in the 90s, and yeah, I just really enjoy it. We've been enjoying the heck out of that show lately. And I also watched in the last week, it was one of the films while Joshua was on a work trip that I watched by myself because I was like, he's not going to be super into it. I watched Emma, which is a adaptation based off of Jane Austen's novel Emma. It came out about 4 years ago, starring Mia Goth and Anya Taylor-Joy, both scream queens who are gracing the screen in period piece dramas. And actually, it was quite good. Like, I'm ready for a period piece renaissance to happen again. We need more period piece films that are actually interesting. So it was really fun. I actually enjoyed it a lot. I didn't
Are you
think
sure
I
we're
would.
not in a Are you sure we're not in a renaissance right now? I feel like there's period pieces all the time since Downton Abbey.
I mean, I don't think all of them are based off of adapted material, like
Hmm.
based off of IP material that are older books and stuff like that. I guess that's more what I mean. Like we had Little Women that came out in 2019, Emma came out in 2020, so we kind of had that, but I'd
Hmm.
like more of it because I really enjoyed it. So I'm talking
Yeah.
about like Jane Austen and stuff like that, like or Louisa May Alcott, like older IPs being transformed into modern text is really interesting to me. And I feel like it's one of those weird things that I'm going to fixate on for a couple months and then we'll see. Yeah, then I'll probably find something else to fixate on.
Hmm.
Which brings me to this film, one that I have fixated on many a time, a
Hmm.
fixation of mine. I watch it probably at least once a year. We are doing Jennifer's Body for this film, and it is a wild ride. What is the summary of this film?
When a demon takes possession of high school hottie Jennifer, played by Megan Fox, she turns a hungry eye on all the guys who never stood a chance with her before. While evil Jennifer satisfies her appetite for human flesh with the school's male population, her nerdy friend, Needy, played by Amanda Seyfried, learns what's happening and vows to put an end to the carnage.
Nice. So, an introduction to this film. This film was released September 18th, 2009. The film was distributed by 20th Century Fox and the short-lived distribution company Fox Atomic, who produced The Hills Have Eyes Too, I Love You, Beth Cooper, and etc. The film was directed by Karen Kusama. She's known for The Invitation, the 2015 version, Destroyer, Girl Fight. The film was written by Diablo Cody, who's known for Juno, Tully, Lisa Frankenstein, and so much more. But more on her later. I have a whole section on her. The film stars young Adam Brody, Megan Fox,
Amanda Seyfried.
and features actors including Chris Pratt. The budget for this film was $16 million, and the film grossed $16 million domestically and $15 million internationally. But since the DVD and Blu-ray era, it made an estimated $8 million off of those sales. The awards and nominations for this film, the MTV Awards included the best WTF moment when Megan Fox is puking the black ooze, the best scared as shit performance by Amanda, and the Razzie Awards, the worst actress nomination was for Megan Fox, which I strongly disagree with. The 2010 Teen Choice Awards, Adam Brody was nominated for Choice Actor, and Megan Fox won for Choice Actress. So, Nick, as we enter Tomato Meter, what do you think the audience versus critic score was?
Let's see. I'm gonna say so. Starting off with critic score, I'm gonna say 37%.
Oof, oof. You're letting your
Oof.
biases get in the way. All right, guess your audience score.
Well, okay. I bet the audience liked it more. So 67%.
Wow. So this one you're actually surprisingly off on. The audience score for this film was only 35%, and
Okay.
the critic score was 46%. So it's interesting. You kind of had them swapped a little bit.
Okay, well that was because I figured like the audience score, like everyone seems to be obsessed with this movie. So I was like, okay, the audience is gonna like it, but not that many people because it's a cult classic. But I figured
Hmm.
the critics would just trash on this movie. Hence my answers, but okay, whatever.
No, I mean, your answers they make sense. They definitely make sense. I'm not denying you that.
Hmm.
When it comes to letterboxed everyday viewers in our day and age, what do you think the score was by viewers on that platform?
Now we're getting to the Wild West here. Uh, I'm gonna say 2.8.
So low, too low. It
Too
got a
low.
3.4 out of 5.
Oh my gosh. I should have went with my first instinct. I was gonna say 3.5. But I was like,
Oh my gosh, you
no,
should
no.
have gone with your instinct, Nick. The reviews for this film include one by Gab. Of course, it's the indie band.
Hmm.
Aaron said, if Megan Fox turns me into lasagna with teeth, then do not prosecute her. She caught me slipping, and that's on me. Fair. And Moira said, with a half-star review, would be lower if it weren't for Megan Fox. It's interesting.
Okay.
Like the reviews for this film across the board, I think we can agree are two different extremes. It's
Hmm.
people who either really, really, really like this movie or people who really, really, really don't like this movie. So
Hmm.
we'll get more into that with our thoughts and opinions. But are you ready for monster movie trivia?
Probably not. But let's do it anyways.
All right, let's go. Monster movie trivia. Dun dun. Okay, finish the line. Hell is a blank blank.
What? Uh hell is
It's like the
uh
tagline for this whole movie.
oh is a hot chick? Hot girl?
Hell is a teenage girl.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That is
Hell
a
have no
nice
wrath like a teenage woman.
hell hath
Oh,
no fury like a woman scorned. So
there
you
we
will
go.
take a slash for that.
Great start. Great
You're
start.
you're starting off really strong. What is Needy's first name? Character
Can look at
name.
my notes. Ah, man. I'm mad because I put that in my notes.
Oh no.
First off, why is this girl going around having the nickname Needy? Hmm? Okay, now I've gotten that out of the way. Now that I've said that,
Mhm.
something Lesnicki,
Do, 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 do.
Arnita.
You were so close to naming an actual name that would have been right. You said Arnita.
Yeah, it was like R, and then Need was in there. I remember
So
that.
her real name is Anita.
It's
So close.
Anita.
So close.
I think you
You
need to
just
give it to me
added an
anyways.
R.
I got the last name
Would
right.
Jennifer have mercy on her victims? I think not. Nice little slash.
Okay, fine, fine.
This is going to be the fastest game that you've probably lost at Movie Trivia in a while.
I don't
Okay.
know. I don't know. Still at 8 to go. Could be a comeback.
Could be a comeback. Let's see you make a comeback. What role did J.K. Simmons play in this film?
Like name or just like can I describe it? Like
If you can get the name, I would prefer that, but because you're doing so bad, I would allow for a description as well.
okay. Well, he was definitely the principal or vice principal, something like that. He had a hook for a hand. He was one of the teachers at the school. He had that great line where he talk like a nervous guy, kind of like this, and remember kids, don't do that, whether you're a cool dude or a hoe.
His character name, for those of you who do know, you did get parts of that right. He is the biology teacher.
He's the bio.
Biology?
Oh my gosh.
A
Right?
biology teacher or chemistry teacher. But his name is Mr. Robelski.
Robelski. Who even? That's a wiener of a name. I'm sorry.
We won't slash you for that one. You got the
Okay.
description generally right. And I'm only saying that because I think our audience would have gotten the first two right.
Okay.
So, let's let you stay in the mix a little longer. I'm feeling generous, mostly because I probably am going to kill you in our RPG. In the institution that Needy is in, what do they call her? They call her a
Oh,
like,
kicker.
yeah. All right, you got it. Okay. What is a city Devil's Kettle named after?
There's a real city? Oh my gosh.
No, no, no. I mean, in the universe of the movie.
Oh, what is it named after? There's some weird waterfall that turns into a whirlpool that they swear no one has ever found the bottom of. I was
But
like,
they find
what?
it so quickly. But Amanda Needy finds it so quickly. It's wild. Okay. But
Yeah.
yes, you're correct. What is the name of the emo boy that she kills?
Oh, Colin Gray.
Nice.
That one I know.
You're like, I am on Colin Gray's team.
Exactly. Poor guy.
What happens to Jennifer when she doesn't kill?
She becomes like one of the normal girls. Ugly. Is this what
Yes.
normal feels like?
Her hair
Ugh.
is dull, her skin is breaking out. Yes, she describes herself as a normal girl when she doesn't kill.
Needy goes, she looks kind of ugly. I mean, like ugly for her, and she just looks normal. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
she
She
looks
looks
like a
like she's having
normal
an off
human
day.
being.
She looks like she might have a cold. Which thanks for coming to school.
No, she doesn't have a cold. She just needs to kill some boys. No problem. So, question number 8, for those of you who are still doing well, what is the title Jennifer's Body inspired by?
By Jennifer's Body. What is it inspired by? Feminism.
There's a song called Jennifer's Body
That's
by The
right.
Hole, and they featured that song in the song Violet in the film.
Oh gosh, yeah, okay. I
And you're
deserve
gonna
that one.
take a slash.
Ah, I even remember reading up about that one. Yeah, I deserve
Yep.
that one.
He said as he gets tortured, I deserve that. It's fine. All right, question 9 for those of you who are still in it. Who were some of the other actors who auditioned for Needy?
Some of the other um
Take a wild
how
guess of who was
I know.
popular in the early 2000s.
Gosh, I don't know. Lindsay Lohan.
2000s into the 2010 era. Who's popular?
I don't know who. I don't know who would be popular that would also fit into this role. Let's see.
And it's not who would fit because they did not get cast in the role.
Okay, Rachel McAdams. Although I guess the late 2000s would probably be a little too late for her. But I don't know. I'm just going off of who is a Mean Girls at this point.
I'll let you know. That way we don't have to torture you any longer.
Yeah.
Some of the other actors who auditioned for Needy included Emma Stone, Amanda Bynes,
Mm,
Lizzie Kaplan, and Brie Larson, which all of them I think would have had a very different and interesting take on it. I love that Amanda got the role. I think she crushed it. But
yeah.
the story would have been totally different with any one of those other actors, I think.
Oh yeah. I don't think Amanda Bynes would have been a good fit. She does. I can't see her nerdy in any way. So
And there's the final question. Who was in consideration for Jennifer for this film? Outside of Megan Fox, because she was pretty much the first choice, but there was another actress who briefly was considered as well.
I'm just, for the sake of time, I'm just gonna pass on this. I don't know.
It was
Clearly,
Blake Lively. Blake
Blake
Lively
Lively.
in the midst of her Gossip Girl era, but she couldn't commit to anything like it because she had Gossip Girl going on, and it was in the midst of its heyday.
I've never seen Gossip Girl, so I wouldn't know.
Okay, well, do yourself a favor, watch an episode tonight. It's wild. It's a classic early 2000s drama. But Nick, what are your thoughts and opinions on this film?
Well, I feel like those listening could probably tell at this point. I was not a big fan of this film. I mean, there were just so many things. I'll start by saying what was okay about the movie, which was
Okay.
Some of the dialogue was actually kind of funny. You know, there are some golden one-liners. I think this is a good movie to have everyone who wants to just ironically watch it and make fun of it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I disagree, but okay.
like in that sense, because if it's gonna be a bunch of like just like ironic or just funny lines, then it, I think that's where this has the most of its strength. But I felt like I already knew the ending right at the very beginning
Hmm.
because when Amanda Seyfried's character was in Edie's like saying like they call me Kicker, and I'm like that's a weird name. Why do they call you Kicker? And then she kicks a person 20 feet in the air. I'm like, oh, she's not human. There's something
Yeah.
up with her. That's not something a normal person can do. So they already gave away their ending from the very beginning.
Hmm.
I felt like most of the acting wasn't that great. Because it's supposed to be a horror comedy, but here's the thing. Most of the characters, they don't seem to take it like it's a comedy. I feel like some of them take it very seriously, and then I didn't
The
really.
comedy is in the tragedy. That's the
mm,
type of horror comedy, in my opinion. But keep
You'll have to
going. I'll keep
explain yourself a
arguing with
bit
you.
more about that. But I didn't like how Megan Fox delivered her lines. I felt like it was mostly supposed to be deadpan comedy.
Hmm.
Like she delivers these wild lines, but she says it all with a straight face. But none of the other characters also like react to it.
Hmm.
And it almost seems like it's all a slight form of deadpan comedy, which isn't great because you need people who are reacting in a more dramatic way to act as a foil to the deadpan to
Mm.
to lift up the deadpan. And I wasn't seeing that. Everyone seemed to be taking their lines too seriously. So I felt like a lot of the jokes kind of just missed in that regard. What was it? Also, my biggest thing, which is the fact that at the end that she gets demon powers, it kind of just like I don't feel like that's a good way to write a hero of a character to have them at the very end
Mm.
gain power from the same source that from the creature they had to fight or kill just for the sake of revenge. Like it doesn't make sense to me that she waited so long to go get her
Yeah.
revenge if she knew she had these powers. And again, I don't think that's a good way to write a hero. I will say this, my favorite character, the funniest person probably in that movie to me. So second favorite actually would be J.K. Simmons because I thought he was just wild.
Yeah, he
Because
really did say like the most unhinged things for a high school teacher, and it was really entertaining to listen to
I have the line here where he goes like, "Who's a cool dude or who's a hoe?" And I'm like, "Are you serious?"
him.
And 3% of the proceeds are gonna go to our school for their song. And remember to eat the pecan sandies, kids.
Do you have another favorite character in
Yeah.
addition to your?
My other favorite character would have to be Adam Brody and the band. They seem to be the only ones that understood that this was a comedy. Like they were just like he would say some wild lines and actually have like some crazy expression like when the whole bar's on fire and he's like, "Oh, that's so sad. You guys want to go get a drink in my van?"
Yeah, you want to go to
Look,
my
I'm in
van?
survival mode right now. Okay, we're all crazy. Look, we got to go somewhere familiar. Let's go to my van.
You know what? I like Adam Brody's performance too, and I think so. I differ from you in a lot of ways in that I really like this movie. I think Megan Fox's performance is beautiful in the sense that her character is constantly calculating and has an ulterior motive, and especially when she turns into a demon, you can see that. And I love Amanda's character when she becomes this like badass at the end who's willing to do anything to get justice. So I think in some ways where you think the comedy didn't necessarily hit, it's because it's like awkward girl comedy where like
That's okay. Wait,
that's
wait,
it's
wait.
like it's
You
awkward
said
there and
she's
it's
calculating. She doesn't seem calculating at all. She literally just, oh, I don't think so. I'm not gonna go out with you, Colin Gray. And then Needy says something nice about him and goes, "Oh, you like him? Hey, Colin, I think I will go out with you." She doesn't calculate.
She is. That's so
She
calculating.
sees
She, with
no, she
that
just
move,
sees what she wants and just goes for it. And she doesn't think of
but she didn't want Colin until Amanda expressed interest in him. Until Needy expressed interest, she had no interest in him. And because she ultimately wants this relationship with Needy, she she wants this friendship and possibly more with Needy. She is willing to get in the way and to destroy other relationships to create a path for the two of them. So I personally like it because I think the dialogue is so quippy, so early 2000s, and I think I honestly genuinely love the performances of all the actors. Like I said, this is probably a film I watch every year. It's on my annual like Halloween watch list. And apparently there's a director's cut. I watched some of the deleted scenes that I'll include below, and I think the deleted scenes they better cement the character arc of Needy, and they better define the relationship and friendship that Needy and Jennifer had. So I think part of me wishes that they kept that because the film is a lot about these girls growing apart and the difficulty of that. And I think everyone can relate to friendships growing apart. Maybe not all of our friends are possessed by demons, but there's a human relatability to it that people can empathize with, and people
yeah.
can empathize with the characters. And even if the characters are heightened or dampened by their deadpan delivery or by the extraneous circumstances, they're still characters that you can relate to. So I think for those reasons, I personally love this movie, and I love that it's a female director and writer combo. I will say I dislike how many flashbacks there are. It
Mhm.
jumps back and forth in time too much. Similar to what you said, I wish they kept the reveal at the very end when she like punts the person across the room with her foot. It would have
Yeah.
been nice if her demon powers were revealed at the end,
Which,
and that
what
was
a
the only
weird thing to kick a
reveal.
girl for. You should have more complex carbs. Shut up! Kicks her in the chest. Like, oh my gosh. Just give me some nutrition advice.
You know what? There's so much nutrition advice out there. You got to punt away the people who are telling you wrong.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe she has IBS. Maybe too much complex carbs are not good for her.
I still disagree with you wildly about Megan Fox being calculating because the only reason her plans work is because she's dealing with teenage boys. You know, if she would try that in the adult world, if she was like, hey, we should have sex because right before this guy died, he told me that you and I should have sex. Like, that wouldn't work in the real world. I'm sorry.
I think you're putting yourself at a disadvantage when you assume the power of one's charisma.
Mm,
And I think that's her strength in this movie. And I mean, as we'll see in the RPG, she's a succubus. She's got these powers of charisma that are otherworldly. And I think that's something they play onto in this movie where people are literally enraptured by her. And I think while you're right, they wouldn't do that in a normal situation because she has these new abilities as a demon. She can be seen as so much more than just a high school girl. But
mm,
I think I'm curious what audiences will think of this movie if they agree that it's now a cult classic and that they enjoy watching this film, or if it's one that they would prefer not to watch. Because I get it. Like it is a bit of a slower movie when there's so many flashbacks.
yeah.
It slows down the pace a lot of what otherwise could be a much more interesting movie.
Hmm. And I'll put in one more point, which is actually in favor of the movie to an
Okay.
extent. Post watching the film, I was doing my research, obviously, for a podcast, and I looked it up, and someone had an interesting essay about the symbols of feminism through this movie. And, you know, again, coming as a guy, obviously, it's not as, it doesn't impact me as much as it is, or as people just say, like, it's not for me. But
Yeah.
here, I guess we can kind of we've been joking about this a while, but Nick here's about the mansplained feminism, everybody.
No, I'm curious what you learned from that article because it's this film hits people in different ways. So go for it.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
So here is what I found out. So Jennifer represents two different types of feminism ideas, which are first is lipstick feminism, which
Mm,
refers to the whole idea of women being sexual beings and using that, harnessing that sexual prowess as, your source for strength, which she kind of refers to when she refers to men in bars as little morsels and
yeah.
refers to her own breasts as smart bombs.
These are like smart bombs, okay? You point them in the right direction and shit gets real.
It's such a
Yeah,
good scene though.
there's that, and then there's also female separatism,
Mm.
which is the idea that women can reach their full potential only when separate from men.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It was this idea that's presented forth. It's the fact that she is trying to kill, at least for like the first part of the movie, she kind of switches at the end there, but she is targeting men specifically.
Mm.
And she seems more obsessed of her relationship with Needy. And it doesn't suggest that she's ever going to try and murder Needy until the very end when she gets in her way.
Right.
So she represents those two ideas of feminism, but then Needy represents more of a conservative feminism in the sense that she still argues for, equality in the sense that she goes to bat for her friends in front of the punk rock band, and she shows her own strengths and her at least some level confidence for herself and her own intellect. And it's
Yeah.
the whole movie becomes a conflict of new wave feminism versus conservative feminism, and the fact that Needy wins is a win for conservative feminism. Conservative feminism is obviously great because all people of all genders should be equal. Having that movie represent that was a win for me. It's just that again, it kind of gets undercut at the end when Needy gets demon powers because it kind of means that she didn't have the strength to take revenge on her own. She had to
Mm.
borrow power from what we are told is the villain of the film.
Oh, interesting. I guess I hadn't seen it from the perspective of her borrowing power from the villain being a bad thing. And
Mhm.
that kind of makes sense within the plot of the story, but everything else that you're saying I'm totally tracking with. That it makes a lot of sense. And I think the relationship between these two and the juxtaposition on their worldviews is like a very central point of this film and what they
Mhm.
constantly go back and forth on, and how Needy as this like nerdy girl is like, I have to be the one to stop it because I'm the only one who can. And
Mhm.
I think for those reasons, it is a film that I like. And I think I like the analysis that you have of these two different contradictory views of feminism and how they play into the script, and these two different perspectives that these women have that they have to battle it out in real time. But I think another thing I loved about this movie was the 2000s pop culture, like the classic
Oh yeah.
early 2000s where we didn't take ourselves so freaking seriously.
What are you talking about? Some people were.
Well, I think in some horror now, we're like, we have to make it as dark and brooding as possible. And we have to make it so, like, it's not as campy as the 80s, but it's not as
Mm,
dark and brooding as we make it today. Like, where you
okay.
look at Hereditary, Midsommar, those are both Ari Aster films, but even like Parasite, which is a thriller, and a lot of the other stuff coming out today is like much more brooding. Even Pearl and Maxine, it's like really dark, and it's exploring some of these themes that there's not a lot of comedy within the horror left. I think in some of
Mhm.
these newer films, because we're so focused on creating these elevated experiences that it's not as enjoyable as a viewer. And I feel like the 2000s pop culture now that we're 15 years into the future, it's more enjoyable to watch, in my opinion.
Yeah, I see your point there, and I agree with you in the sense that like I think people are still making horror comedies in this sense, but yeah, they're people tend to take themselves more seriously nowadays as far as horror films. Because everyone wants to get that perfect movie. I would just change comedy to campy. I feel like more of the 2000s are
Mm,
campy.
that's a good
Um,
call. I think you're correct in that campiness was used as a beneficial tool then.
yeah, which, I thought produced some great movies in the 2000s for that matter. But yeah, no, I loved all the little 2000s nostalgia references there. I like tracked like, oh my gosh, there's a Motion City soundtrack poster in Chip's room. Oh my goodness, there's a Fallout Boy poster. Oh my goodness.
The
'Cause
classic early 2000s, even like the costume design with the low-rise jeans, please,
Mhm.
let's not make those come back. I'm good without those. Let's just nix them right now. But the like low-rise jeans, the doodling in notebooks and yearbooks and stuff like that, that just was like nostalgic to that time. And sure, maybe we doodle in yearbooks now, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
It was just a different era. And I think that honestly brings me into our writer for this film, if you'd like to learn a little bit about her.
Yes, please tell us more about our writer for the film.
Yes, the writer for this film was Diablo Cody. Diablo Cody actually is a screen name to keep anonymity for herself and from her parents when she had started writing blogs. She initially started with a very normal career trajectory where she went to college, graduated from the University of Iowa. She wanted to be a writer, so she took that conventional path of working at an ad agency. But on a whim, she just decided, she was like, what I'm doing is too conventional, like too easy almost. So she took a hard left, moved across the country to be with her long distance boyfriend, who eventually became her spouse, and ended up stripping as a hobby. And ended up picking up some other odd jobs like insurance claims person, working on a phone sex line, and more. But eventually, stripping became her full time job. And believe it or not, stripping is what opened the door for her to Hollywood. So she ended up writing about her experiences as a stripper on her blog, and she titled it Candy Girl, which is what led her to her call from Hollywood. And at that point, the call from Hollywood was they had interest in her writing, but she had never written a screenplay. So they wanted her to give a whack at it. And she decided to give it a try. So she read like how to write screenplays from Barnes and Noble, of all things. And she ended up writing the film Juno.
Mhm.
And Juno is an Academy Award winning film for writing. And she's known for writing these strong female characters in films, but they're characters that you don't typically see in film. So she writes about these interesting female stories that you don't typically hear in media. And I think that was one of the things that really drew me to her as when we were researching. One of the quotes that she had that really kind of summed her up in a nutshell was stripping toughened my hide, but exposing myself as a writer has been a lot more brutal. So I think that sums up her writing experience in a nutshell. She writes these very vulnerable and interesting characters who are imperfect and flawed, but not in the anti-hero way that we're seeing quite as much today. They're
Mhm.
seeing almost more as not victims, but people who are adapting to their situation, who are put in a precocious situation and they have to adapt from it. Fun fact, she actually wrote Jennifer's Body before the film Juno. And as I mentioned, she won the Academy Award for screenwriting for Juno. And she was only 29 years old. She won the Academy Award for that film. This is just a casual plug to check out her film Lisa Frankenstein that she wrote in the last year. It just came out this past year. I love it. It may be a future Halloween costume for Joshua and I if I can convince him to dress up with me. But let's talk a little bit more about Jennifer's Body, specifically if you're interested. So
Okay.
some people say Jennifer's Body was, people have gotten this confused with a true crime story, and I'm going to clear the air on that. So maybe subconsciously there was some connection between this true crime story and her actual story writing it. But the true crime story goes as this. Elise Poller, back in 1995, she was under the impression of going to smoke marijuana with a couple of guys that she met. And 15-year-old Jacob DeLishma, 14-year-old Joseph Fiorella, and Royce Casey, who was 16 years old, they got together less than a quarter mile away from her house and they brutally killed her. And they desecrated her body, they stabbed her a dozen times, and she actually died of blood loss and not the wound itself. Unfortunately, with this true crime case, the police did not intervene right away. They assumed it was a runaway teen case, and they put the whole case on the back burner until 8 months later, Royce Casey confessed to the crime and brought them to her body, which they had hidden. Their initial motives were to sacrifice her body to Satan to increase interest in their indie rock band, which is just wild and very on plot.
So you're saying that part happened in real life?
That happened in real life with
Oh my gosh.
but they ended up not even making a quote unquote sacrifice because it was said to involve cannibalism. They ended up just killing her instead. So Diablo Cody's actual inspiration for this project, she loves horror and she wanted it to be about a female friendship, about a girl who eats boys, because she thought the dichotomy between a female friendship and then this one girl who's sole focus to living is eating boys would be a really interesting juxtaposition. So I think maybe subconsciously she took some inspiration from the story of Elise Poller, but most of the things that I found was it really was based on her interest in horror. And this was, like I said, a dream project of hers. And the bummer is, because of how this film did commercially, it was one of the first and only films that she had complete freedom with writing. From then on, she had a lot more monitoring to make sure that the film would be more of a commercial success. But Diablo Cody, when she made this film, she honestly could see it not doing well from the beginning because she was like, she realized that these characters were so personal to her. She even describes, she saw her real birth name, Betsy, as more of the needy character, the reserved, the quiet, the brave, but almost more naive, compared to Diablo Cody, who represented more the Jennifer character, who is based on her alter ego and her screen name and like the more edgy side of her personality. And when this film actually was getting made, they had a lot of women audition before they knew it was going to be Amanda, as I mentioned in our trivia. But they, as I mentioned, were super interested in Megan Fox.
So that was the thing, was part of the thing that kind of resulted in this movie becoming a cult classic, because to be a cult classic you had to kind of not do well at the beginning, was because of the marketing, right? And the whole sense of how this film was marketed to people, which I believe you want to talk
I've
more
got
about.
some whole tea on that. Yeah, so let's jump into the marketing for this film. You're right. The marketing on this film was marketed horrendously. It was marketed initially only to white straight males. That's who the studio was like, this film has Megan Fox. That's all we need to know. We don't need to know anything about the plot. So even with the marketing images, you see her in like much more salacious clothing, including her cheerleading uniform is much more cropped and things like that, because they are trying to market to a straight male audience. Even the test screening for this film, they brought in young men because they thought Megan Fox, young men. And literally one of the test screening responses was a kid who said it needs more boobs. So they clearly missed the mark with the marketing of this film. They wanted to market it as sex sells. Megan Fox had just gotten done with Transformers not too long ago, and they wanted audiences to focus on Megan Fox hot, not on female-led story, female villain, female protagonist, female director, female writer. And they even wanted to go so far as have Megan Fox promote the film on amateur porn sites, which
Oh my
the women,
goodness.
the like executive women of this film were very quick to be like, absolutely not. That's not what this
Yeah.
film is about.
And I'm sorry, but whoever takes the comment of it needs more boobs seriously probably needs to be fired if they weren't.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that, like, Diablo Cody had a quote that kind of summed up the marketing plan. She said, you're disappointing your audience. It's almost like they had a marketing plan in place before they saw the movie and they just stuck with that marketing plan. And a big part of their marketing strategy too was having people who had only seen Juno, which is a completely different type of movie, and people who wanted to see Megan Fox. So they didn't have people who were fans of horror or fans of female-led movies. They only had people who wanted to see Megan Fox or were interested in something else entirely. So I think this film, before it even came out, was doomed for failure because of the marketing.
Yeah.
It has great dialogue. It's not perfect. I can confidently say that. It's not a perfect film by any means. It's flawed, as every film is flawed. But I do think that this film got a lot more rap than it needed to, because I think if it had been re-released today, it would do a lot better. There'd be
I
audiences
will
all
go and
over.
I will go far enough to agree with you on that, in that, this whole marketing scheme of selling sex with focusing on Megan Fox, I don't think it was a strong point for this film. And honestly, I feel like as much as I don't like it, there were some good things to this film, and they needed to focus more on those good attributes, rather than what having it all just spotlight on Megan Fox the whole time.
Yeah.
And the whole, again, sex sell stuff.
There was a lot of choices that were made in the marketing department that kind of determined the failure of the initial release of the movie. But as we've seen, it's made a total comeback.
Mhm.
And before we talk a little bit more about cult classics, I think there's a couple things about the making of this film that I would love to know, especially Jennifer's demon side. How did they actually pull that off?
All right, so just to talk about it briefly here. So I'm going to talk about the favorite effects of the film, which is her snake-like demon jaw and how they pulled that off. So
Okay.
I was reading an interview with Eric Nordby, who was from the MPC Vancouver, major was it Motion Picture Company Vancouver, who handled the special effects. And he was quoted saying that he wanted to make sure that everything was seemed old school, hands off, and had a lo-fi approach to it. So they were really trying to balance the special effects with the visual effects. So you didn't have that whole too much CGI going on. So they decided they wanted to build up to those scenes where we see her jaw just go like that,
Yeah.
completely unhinged. So it was a slow burn transformation. He's quoted as saying there was a 5-stage process to this. First, we're gonna start with beautiful Jennifer. She's just gonna look beautiful. Everyone's gonna be going gaga over her. Then we have stages 2 and 3 where they start using makeup to kind of make recesses in her eyes, kind of cave them in a bit, make them seem
Mm.
darker. And then stage 4 is when later on in the film we start giving her custom dentures, and using visual effects for facial warping, whatnot, more recessing of the eyes, and even some musculature deformity. And finally, stage 5 is where we get that last scene where she's in the spring formal dress, and she just goes full transformation. And that was achieved via special green screen jaw device. It was very complicated in that they basically had to green screen her actual jaw so it disappeared, and then it kind of just attach this fake jaw device. And the thing was, it wasn't actually, if I read this article correctly, it wasn't Megan Fox who was actually wearing that device. It was a posing double. And so what they did for 10 days, they spent filming that last big scene, the climax of the film. It was her double wearing that device, and Megan Fox just had some fake dentures in, and basically they had to work together. It was a lot of practice shooting, and the double would have to see how Megan Fox moves as she pretends to do like an attack or something like that, and copy that, and then they'd have to film the double doing it. That one little effect, just had a lot behind it.
Dang, that's fascinating that it required a whole nother person. Because I get it, because there's doubles and stunt people are super important to this industry, but I don't think I realized how much a double was needed for this like jaw contraption that they were working with.
Yeah, it was interesting to me too, their choice on why they went with a double. I believe it was essentially so that Megan Fox didn't have to, go through that whole process every single time. And they could focus on her just doing her regular movements. So when it came to the effect finally coming in, which was just a small fraction of the film, they
Mhm.
could do like little trick shots to make sure it still looked like it was Megan Fox still there.
Yeah,
So,
which totally makes sense because I mean she has other things that she needs to do with her time as an actor, a
mhm,
lead actor on that film. In regards to her performance, you brought up how she kept looking increasingly more sunken in. And part of that
mhm.
was her. She lost 15 pounds for the role and was like 97 pounds when they were filming. And she was
Oh my God.
inside for 4 months. So that way she could look pale and iridescent when they filmed some of those indoor pool scenes, especially with her in that spring formal dress. She looks like otherworldly, but she's a demon. It's crazy the way that they executed that.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that. Like the fact that she had to go through all that. It's always painstaking, or not painstaking, but it's always painful to hear what some of the actors got to do, to look the part. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
but
I
yeah,
think it was probably more her choice than like a
probably,
demand, but
probably.
it's still fascinating that she was so committed to this role that she was willing to put her body under extreme pressure to make it happen.
Yeah, so that's the big special effect. And then one other one I had a note about, I figured because, it takes place in Devil's Kettle and they talk about how it's famous for its little whirlpool thing. I thought I'd talk about the
Yeah.
little whirlpool effect. Very quick
Oh
note.
yeah.
Basically what they did to achieve that little whirlpool bottomless hole looking effect, there's an actual river that they went and they filmed. And they got a lot
Mhm.
of bird's eye view shots of it. They specifically made sure to get shots of it during the night and during the day because they weren't sure exactly what to go for. And what they ended up doing at the end of it all was filming the lake, and then they had the map on some pixels at the very end of the lake that just happened by coincidence to match the texture of the actual river, so that way everything kind of worked together. And so, well, all that to say is that, wouldn't you know, guys, the whirlpool isn't real.
I'm
It
actually kind of surprised by that because it looks kind of real. So
does. It works. I was like, huh. But they probably just I figured the whirlpool is like, oh, they should probably put the hole in there via something. But I was surprised to hear that everything was fake in that.
that's
Yeah.
fascinating. So when I brought up the dress earlier that Jennifer was wearing, I think costumes are another important part of this movie. It's interesting dressing a demon like a cutesy girl because that's not super common. I think we see it more in D&D nowadays than we did 15 years ago. They dress her purposefully in these like non-threatening patterns and colors and the costume designer Katia
Stano.
she was inspired by a lot of Japanese street fashion with leg warmers, micro skirts, animal keychains, but something that was realistic to achieve within a small town. So to show that she's
Yeah.
stylish and cool and popular, but not like so unachievable. Because I feel like there's some shows, like we brought up Gossip Girl earlier, that use these crazy clothing brands like Dolce and Gabbana, Givenchy, in a lot of their daily fashion. And that's not realistic for a traditional high schooler, even if they're on the Upper East Side. But I think they did a great job of showing how fashionable Jennifer could be on a realistic budget within a small town. She definitely gave small town popular girl vibes all the way. And it was
Yeah.
interesting that her clothing became a weapon as soon as she became a demon. She was like dressing more intentionally for her victims with layers that she could take off and dressing more cutesy and feminine to almost draw in her victims. And I thought it was generally interesting that Jennifer's character had rules for how Needy should dress because it showed their power dynamic, how much power that Jennifer had over Needy, that she was willing to follow such strenuous rules for her fashion.
Yeah. That was another line I noted in the film I took as like just ridiculous, where she's like, I could show midriff, but no cleavage. Tits are her trademark. And I'm like, I remember taking note of that. Like, I'm sorry, you're the first one to come up with, or she's the first one to come up with that? They're her trademark? Are you sure?
High school is rough where you're constantly trying to figure out your identity, and sometimes that shows in what you're wearing. And I feel like they did a great job accurately portraying that part, where they're like, I need to make my characters look as good, quote unquote, as they possibly can be. And one thing that I noticed that I read in an interview by Katia was white in films usually represent gore, like white in horror films. So as soon as she wore the white dress, people should know like she's things are going to go bad. Like when she wears a white jacket, that's kind of a representation of her looking like the sacrifice lamb who's going to be stabbed to death. And it kind of, when you see her as a demon for the first time, just covered in blood, it almost makes you sympathize with her character because she didn't plan on getting into this situation. So with Needy's prom dress, it's described, and I'll bleep myself here, as a afterbirth of a dress by Diablo Cody in the script. And Kusama, the director, she said, by the time I was working with a costume designer, I'd shown her a lot of reference material, 80s dresses that are terrible. And the more terrible that they make it, the worse, like the worse that they are, the better that they're going to look on the actor. So they intentionally wanted something that looked absolutely god awful. So that way, the longer that she wears it, the more that she's like distressed, the better that the dress will look. And I think they kind of nailed that with Amanda's dress, where it looked truly terrible in the beginning. And they kind of made it look like something a hero would wear by the end of that scene. The costume designer did say she loved having Jennifer's gown, which was made by Jessica McClintock, who is a designer famous for prom dresses. But her one regret as being the costumer in this film was with the prom scenes that it was absolutely freezing when they were filming in Canada. And Megan Fox was walking around in like sub-zero temperature in that tank top dress. And that shawl that she's wearing it tightly around her because it was so freaking cold. And she had no real outerwear.
That did not look like something that is functional for warmth, you know?
No,
we'll put it that way. I don't know. It's always weird trying to talk about what female dresses as a guy. I'm like, I don't know what the that doesn't.
It's okay. I get it. We can skedaddle onto cult films if you want.
Okay.
Tell me about this film and how it made its comeback.
First thing was I wanted to make sure, does this fit within the definition of a cult classic? And I made sure, just so everyone's clear, what a cult classic is. It's a movie that acquired a specific fan base over time, but was initially unsuccessful on its initial release. And now the fan base must have some type of passionate engagement. So what I found out was this movie, which I believe you said at the beginning, had a $16 million budget, but only made 16.2, so barely broke even.
Domestically, yeah.
Yeah, so that terrible initial release, mostly again, probably because of the marketing, but eventually over time, it started to gain a strong LGBTQ fan base because of the relationship probably between the characters Needy and Jennifer, but also a strong fan base from women in general because of the fact that people started to find out as it became available, you know, either through DVD or streaming, that this was actually a feminist movie of sorts, you know, with an all-female cast. So in that regards, you know, we see a stronger fan base from those two specific demographics. So that's how it kind of became a cult classic in a sense. Oh, I also have a note here. It started getting some stronger engagement, especially after the Me Too movement, which maybe you could talk more on that.
No,
but it's just something that was noted in the timeline.
Yeah, in the timeline, you're absolutely correct. When the Me Too movement started really kicking off is when this film started making a comeback because women could even relate to the title of Jennifer's Body because it's a story about Jennifer losing autonomy with her body. And it's this constant power struggle of her using her body as a weapon versus being a victim of her body almost, because that's how she gets turned into a demon in the first place. She thinks she has control by using her body, and then she gets taken advantage of and murdered. But social media also was a huge point in making this film more popular. Once TikTok and Instagram started making clips of this movie, it became a lot more popular because it was accessible to people and it was available on streaming. Although the streaming model isn't necessarily the best for a lot of newer films coming out, it is really convenient to find things to watch that are a little bit older. And Megan Fox had a great quote. She genuinely didn't believe people were ready for a movie like that at our time in society and culture when it came out in 2009. And I think in some ways she's right. I think we are all very different as people and as a society and how we saw film and women in film at that time. Diablo Cody also talks about the relationship with Needy and Jennifer. And initially she had written this relationship to feel almost romantic because female relationships, especially when you're in high school, can feel so intense. And they wanted to show how Needy wants to be approved by Jennifer. And she wants that approval and that acceptance. And there was more than just friendship. Obviously, that's clear. But there was this just extremely strong baseline of sandbox love never dies. And I think the director's cut has some really interesting scenes that were cut. And I'll include those linked below that explain a little bit more about their background in their relationship as friends. But even now, Diablo Cody has been interested in the possibility of a sequel or a TV series. She references Buffy the Vampire Slayer as an example when she initially would pitch this to other people as like, what if I made a TV show out of this Jennifer's body? And people honestly weren't into it until about 5 years ago. And people now are like, wow, we would love a sequel or we'd love a TV series that could dive more into this story. And there's been other mediums that have come out, like there's graphic novels that have come out about Jennifer's body, but it really has gained a cult following because it relates to so many different audiences. Nick, do you think researching this film has kind of transformed your opinions on it?
Yes, I think researching it has given some perspective on the interesting aspects of how the film was made. And it gave me a little bit more sympathy for the film in the sense of like, okay, you know, like as much as I don't agree with this movie, it sucks that it kind of got abused the way it did by marketing teams.
Yeah.
And you know, that's not a fate I wish upon any film. There are definitely some lines that if you quote them though, I will laugh at because they're just ridiculous.
They're so good.
Overall, still not a fan of the movie.
That's
Not
okay.
a fan of Jennifer's body.
That's all right. One of us is a fan, one isn't. It's about time we've had one that we're like polar opposites on. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening to our deep dive on Jennifer's body. I hope you enjoyed learning more about the making of this film and Diablo Cody and all the aspects that went into making this campy, fun cult classic. Make sure to stay tuned for our Pester the Guester and RPG episode coming up. And make sure to share this episode with a friend if they're a fan of Jennifer's body or not. You know, fight it out in the comments. We'd love to hear your opinions. All right. Well, that's all from us. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.